I think Ms. Sanasuso brought this up, but I don't think the court directly ruled on it. And that is, Your Honor, if we're going to give these two duties that address directly to the Board of Elections and the Board of Elections, and then in the next paragraph says County Board of Elections employees, and for the first time introduces that word, how do we justify giving those, or I should say, how do we justify not giving the definition of Board of Elections, the statutory definition, and the statutory definition of Board of Elections employees? It's only going to, Your Honor, this is going to thoroughly confuse the jury. This means that we can't argue that there's a distinction between Board of Elections and Board of Elections employees. We know by the testimony. First, we know in fact there is. Second, we know by the testimony. Witnesses testify that there's a Board of Elections that's appointed by whoever it's appointed by. And it defines it statutorily. So when this jury instruction package jumps from a duty imposed on the Board of Elections and nobody else, and then another duty imposed on the Board of Elections and nobody else, and then the very next line, Your Honor, it says, it basically restates the second duty, but it injects Board of Elections employee. It just injects that language employee. Now, if I can't get up there and say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Rosie Grier is not a county board of election. That's what I intend to do, and say she's not bound by this duty. Now, Your Honor, you asked, what duty are they bound by? Your Honor, I very respectfully say the prosecutor has the burden of proof in the case. There may be no duty that the prosecutor has brought to the attention of, or that has been brought out through evidence that requires the court to give this jury charge. If there's not, there's not, Your Honor. We have to call a spade a spade. If there's not, if the prosecutor brought this case, and throughout his testimony he didn't introduce any evidence that there's a duty on an employee as opposed to a board, why should we have to explain that? And I just ask that kind of rhetorically, but very, very seriously. I don't know how this can happen. Why can't we at least give definitions that are statutory, that are very clear?
Well, would you agree with me that a duty imposed on the board for appointed members, that the only way the board can fulfill that duty is through its employees? They can't go all over,
yes,
right?
Your Honor, yes, I agree with that. But this is a court of law. This is a criminal case.
Isn't that the only way for that duty to be satisfied? Is
no. By
the delegation of the board to its employees to fulfill the statutory and legal duties imposed by the law?
Your Honor, the answer is no, and I'll tell you why it's no. If you look at number 1, Your Honor, here it says right here, this is the duty that we're using. At the time and place that's fixed for making your recount, the Board of Elections, in the presence of witnesses who may be in attendance, shall open the sealed containers containing the ballots to be recounted and shall recount them. Now, the Board of Elections, the 4-member board, Your Honor, they take this recount so seriously, they could walk into that recount room when those hundreds of witnesses are present and say, here, we have the ballots, we're the board members, let's lay them out on the table, and we've done that pursuant to law. They could very well do that. Then they could appoint people.
Could delegate that to them.
Then they could delegate, Your Honor. But the point of the matter is, that's all academic, and they could do that. This is a criminal case. The prosecutor has a burden of proof. He has to present duties. These duties so far aren't incumbent or imposed upon employees. They're imposed by their very terms upon the Board of Elections. And, Your Honor, the Board of Elections is a statutorily defined term. So if we want to be open and honest with this jury, let's give them the definition. And let's be fair about it. He has the burden of proof.
Well, I think, and my ruling, as a matter of law, is that that's a specious argument to the jury, and that would mislead them, that the board can delegate its duty to its employees, and those are the duties incumbent on those employees. The same duties imposed on the board and other election officials. And so as a matter of law, I'm making that finding, and therefore I think instructions are correct.
Your Honor, I understand that you make that finding as a matter of law, but still, don't we leave hanging the question of, okay, so then, has there been testimony concerning which duties were delegated? For example, Your Honor, there's been virtually no testimony in this case about Rosie Grier. A couple of witnesses mentioned her name. Now, I'm in the position where the jury instructions are saying that basically by some kind of by some kind of delegation that was not mentioned in court, Rosie Grier has the same duties that the Board of Elections has. And I say that's very unfair. I mean, it hasn't been introduced through testimony. I understand the court's ruling as a matter of law, but still, the court's not the prosecutor. He's the prosecutor, and he has to present those duties. If someone up there came and testified and said, we're from the Board of Elections has designated these duties and imposed them upon Rosie Grier, then I completely agree with you, and that would be a valid instruction. So for that reason, I vehemently object to that.
Well, I ruled on that issue with respect to Rule 29 motion. I found that there was sufficient evidence.
Okay, Your Honor, I'm not arguing about Rule 29 right now.
Well, you're making a Rule 29 argument.
Your Honor,
You're not talking about the law, you're talking about what the evidence showed.
Exactly, but Your Honor, that's because your ruling is, as a matter of law, the board delegates their duties. I say, Your Honor, I accept that proposition of law, but still we're lacking evidence that says that any duty that was incumbent upon the board initially has been delegated to Rosie Grier. That's lacking. That's my only point.
I disagree. I think there's evidence, circumstantial evidence, reasonable inferences
Your
from the
Honor.
evidence that indicate that those have been delegated.
What about the definitions? Can we get the definitions in at least so the jury understands who the Board of Elections is? And who employs